Would you like to add anything? Any of the panelists want to add anything in response to the other panelists' remarks? Nothing to add. Okay, so let's turn to the floor. Okay, to the audience. So Francesco and Xavier.
Just two quick reactions to the presentation I've heard. So one of the things I thought while I was listening to you guys is that Krugman made us a massive disservice, but in two ways. One is the one that you have alluded to, that he completely misrepresented what's going on in economics. And so he made us look bad in a way that is completely undeserved. But I think the more subtle damage he has made to us is that he had made it very easy for us to shrug off the criticism, because the things he has said are so outrageous that we can say easily, well, that's a criticism, it's so stupid that we can just ignore it. And so so that it creates a temptation for us from sort of saying, well, you know, if this is the problem, then it's so stupid what he's saying. So we should try to be a bit wary of that and not just think that all the criticism is what Krugman says and then maybe other things that we need to think about. Now, the other thing that struck me was the focus on the bubble per se in many of the presentation, except perhaps at the very end. And I think, you know, looking back just before the crisis, I think, and some of you have said that, I think it's completely true that most people were quite convinced that there were bubbles in housing markets and bubbles in asset prices more general. So that the idea that we didn't know that or we didn't see that is just wrong. But I think there was an element of surprise, or big surprise anyway. It's the following. I think many of us thought, okay, fine, there is a bubble, and this bubble will burst at some point. And then when this bubble bursts, it will look very much like previous bubbles that burst. Say the IT bubble, the NASDAQ bubble. That bubble burst, nothing much happened to the real economy. What really surprised us, I think what surprised me, and what we didn't see coming, is not so much the bursting of the bubble, or the bubble forming or the bursting of the bubble, but the real consequences of the bubble. That's where we really missed it. We didn't see this transmission from the bursting of the bubble to the near collapse of the financial system to the transmission to the real economy. And so that, in that sense, we did miss the boat, I think, in that perspective. So it's also true that catching that boat would really have meant being very familiar with the balance sheets of the banks, and Jochen said that. And then the question is, whose job is that to monitor those balance sheets? I mean, I think it's a fair guess that if macroeconomists had been told that commercial banks and investment banks had invested so hugely in the housing market, many of us would have said, oh, that's not the same thing as NASDAQ. But we just didn't know it. And so I guess one question, which I actually don't know the answer, should we have known that these banks were so exposed to the housing bubble?
Thank you. Xavier, let's collect some questions and comments, and then we'll go back to the panel.
Just a couple of reflections also on with the contributions of the panel. The first, I think, maybe and the most important, maybe from my point of view, is that we should not come out of here thinking that everything is okay. I think what I perceive that, for example, the reaction to the Krugman's article, it's a little bit visceral. I am not completely sure that he has misrepresented completely what we do. I'm not saying I agree, obviously, with everything he says, but we should take it seriously. We do have some issues to worry about. And let me point out one, which I think has been, we have started in a sense to point in the direction I want to go. I think the most important thing of the crisis for us as a lesson is that, obviously, not that we could not predict it, which is kind of silly, but that we could never imagine the extent of the crisis, I think. I don't know. Were we thinking, I was not thinking in my lifetime to see a crisis of the extent of 1929, and we could have had it, okay? Where is what's the element here? And I think the element, for me, the basic element is that we did not see the extent of systemic risk that was hidden in the system. We did not have the appropriate models. We had some elements, but still they're fragmentary, number one. I mean, we have some models. I mean, I have worked on it, and Xavier has worked on it, and many people have worked on it, but still, we are a little bit far. And also, the regulators and the authorities and so on did not have the information. Okay, so there was the shadow banking system, and so under the rock, we had huge systemic risk, huge. No? And this we did not see, we did not know. No? And we probably did not have the appropriate tools. No? And now this will have to be developed, and so we better work at it. We better work at it fast. And then just one comment on models, and with this I end. And in particular with Jaume's presentation. I think there could be another line of attack, which is preserving rationality, but taking very seriously the impact of asymmetric information. And I think there are quite a bit of models on which I have contributed, but many other people, some of these Princeton people also have contributed, on how we can explain perceived departures from asset prices from fundamentals due to the dynamics due to asymmetric information, basically. So that if you had a symmetric information model, you would have no problem, but then with asymmetric information. And I think we can go, I don't know how far, but that we can go somewhat far in this line. There are some fragmentary models already. Probably what has not been done is incorporate what we know, or the limited knowledge we know on this and on the models that you mentioned, in the macro models. Okay, and this is, this has been already, a failure in quotes, or at least a provisional failure. And so let me just end with going back to the beginning. You mentioned the piece by Cristiano et al. On the crisis. Still, there were a couple of Chicago economists which wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal not long ago, saying basically that the financial crisis was, the meltdown was not caused by the failure of Lehman Brothers, but by the intervention of the US government. Okay? And those two guys are John Cochran and Luigi Zingales, leading members of our profession. Okay?
Thanks, Xavier. Any other comments or questions from the audience?